The Ozark Mountain region covers mostly the southern half of Missouri and the northern part of Arkansas, with the majority of the Ozarks being in the state of Missouri, where we are today. Now, located in this part of the country, summers are hot and winters are mild. And being on the edge of the Great Plains, the Ozarks are a transition zone for plants and animals where east meets west. With the Appalachian Mountains to the east and the Rocky Mountains to the west, the Ozark Mountains are the major rugged highlands located in between them. They sit at the border of the deep eastern deciduous forests and the start of the open grasslands and plains found in the west. This means that the Ozarks are a transition zone where some western species and some eastern species can be found in the same region. The Ozarks are not as tall as the other major mountain systems. To give you an idea, the highest point in the Rocky Mountains is Mount Elbert, which reaches up to 14,440 feet above sea level. And the highest point in the Appalachian mountain chain is Mount Mitchell at 6,684 feet. The Ozark Mountains, however, only reach 2,753 feet on the top of Magazine Mountain. Height isn't the only difference, however. The biggest difference is in how they were formed. While the other major mountain chains were mostly made from the bottom up, the Ozark Mountains were formed significantly from the top down. Both the Appalachians and the Rockies are long chains of mountaintops running north and south, with peaks primarily pushed up by plate tectonics from the biblical global flood. The Ozarks were also pushed up from the flood, but as a plateau, a flatter highland area. The composition of the sediment layers here include dolomite, limestone, sandstone, and shale, which are all easily eroded by water. So, the Ozark Highland Plateau became more mountainous primarily as the water carved out valleys and wore down the rock into the rolling hills we have today. The softer sediments and water erosion give these mountains a mix of rounded tops, flat ridges, bluffs, and narrow hollows. This unique landscape is a wonderful place for wildlife. With the east-west transition zone, all the different waterways, and the high diversity of habitat options, there are a lot of plants and animals that can be found right here. With all the waterways in the Ozarks, floodplain forests are very important. These low areas periodically flood from nearby rivers or streams after a hard rain. The forest in the floodplain helps prevent destructive flooding from happening to the surrounding area while minimizing erosion by holding the dirt together with roots. It also filters out pollutants from entering the waterway and improves the water quality itself. This makes the soil wet and very nutrient-rich for plants and trees to grow. Some of the main trees found here are silver maple, bur oak, cottonwood, and willow. With the regular flooding that happens, floodplain forests are in a constant state of change. Sometimes the ground feels dry. Other times it feels muddy and soggy. The trees and the plants and the creatures that live here are tolerant of things being wet. In fact, many of them do best when it is. When hiking through the woods, I love to look down at the forest floor to see what small creatures I can spot. If you don't pay attention to the little things, you can miss out on some incredible creatures, like land snails. Snails and slugs are both gastropods, which means stomach foot. They are a type of mollusk, which is a category of creatures that do not have a backbone or an internal skeleton. There are about 90,000 species of gastropods found across the world and in the oceans. Snails and slugs are very similar to each other in many ways. The main difference is that snails grow a shell that they can pull inside of to protect themselves from predators or to keep in moisture in case it gets too dry around them. There are about 150 species of slugs and snails in the state of Missouri. All of them need similar habitats, like wetlands and forests that provide moist, shady, and cool places for them to live. Snails in particular prefer soils formed from limestone, which is what we have around here, because it provides them the calcium they need for growing their shells. Snails get their calcium through what they eat. They have a diet of dead plants, fruits, vegetables, leaves, and fungi. They are part of nature's cleanup crew, eating decaying organic matter on the forest floor. Instead of having teeth like us to eat, snails have a very rough tongue with thousands of microscopic teeth called a radula that scrapes food into their mouths. Snails have two sets of tentacles on their head. The longer pair on top are their eyes. If you look closely, you can see their tiny eye spots. They don't have very good vision at all, which is why they have another shorter pair of tentacles below that they use to taste and smell and sense the world around them. A snail also has muscles inside its tentacles to help pull its head back inside itself and all the way back into its shell. The name gastropod, or stomach foot, comes from the fact that snails and slugs don't have legs or feet, just a long body that uses muscle contractions to slide on a layer of slimy mucus that it creates. If you put one inside a glass jar or in a tank, you can actually see the waves of muscle contractions that flow down their stomach foot. It's really cool to see. Snails produce different kinds of mucus to surf through life, depending on how wet or dry it is around them. It's always easier for them to move when it's wet, so after a good rain is a great time to find them cruising around. Land snails are fascinating creatures to see up close, but I think it's especially cool to look at their shell. It's amazing that they can grow it for protection, like taking their house with them wherever they go. The shape and design of it is perfect. That spiral is a work of art and engineering, but the snail didn't think that up. That design comes from God. If you're out hiking, a good place to look for slugs and snails is under old logs that are damp underneath. These are great places for them to hide during the day so that they don't dry up. Just remember that if you move the log, to put it back gently right where you found it.